Some stories linger long after they're told. Not because they're particularly gruesome or filled with jump scares, but because they make you question the reality you live in. The kind of tale that, once heard, makes you hesitate before turning off the lights or looking into a darkened window. This is one of those stories. And I swear to you, every word is true. I never used to be afraid of my own home. For the past 15 years, my wife and I had lived in a modest two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Seattle. It was nothing extraordinary, just a place where life happened. Morning coffee, evening television, the occasional dinner party with friends. The kind of existence that felt stable, predictable. But then came the shadow. It started subtly, as these things often do. A flicker in the corner of my eye. A strange sensation, like being watched. The feeling that, even in an empty room, I was not alone. I chalked it up to stress. Overwork. Lack of sleep. Until the night I saw it. It was past midnight, and I had gone downstairs for a drink of water. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. As I stood in the kitchen, cup in hand, my gaze drifted to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. That's when I saw the figure. A tall, dark shape stood just beyond the glass. Unmoving. Featureless. The only detail I could make out was the vague outline of a head and shoulders. Shrouded in complete blackness. My breath caught in my throat. My pulse slammed against my ribs. For a long moment, I simply stood there, frozen, heart pounding in my ears. Then, without thinking, I reached for the light switch. The instant the kitchen flooded with light, the figure was gone. I rushed to the door, peering out into the yard. Nothing. No footprints on the dewy grass. No sign of movement. Just an empty backyard under the pale glow of the porch light. A trick of the mind, I told myself. Shadows playing tricks. I turned off the light and started back upstairs. But just as I reached the second-floor landing, I happened to glance at the hallway mirror. And there, standing behind me in the reflection, was the shadow. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my footing. But the hallway behind me was empty. My chest heaved, my skin prickled with cold sweat. The mirror had shown something, someone, standing just over my shoulder. But when I turned, there was nothing. Just the dimly lit hallway, the closed bedroom doors. And the silence pressing in like a heavy weight. I took a shaky breath and looked back at the mirror. Nothing. I ran a hand through my hair, laughing under my breath. Jesus, I need sleep. That was it, just exhaustion warping my senses. The mind plays tricks in the dead of night, and I'd let my own reflection startle me. But I didn't sleep that night. Even after crawling into bed beside my wife, my eyes remained fixed on the ceiling. The weight of something unseen pressed on my chest, not physically, but in a way I couldn't explain. A nameless unease, as though the very air around me had changed. When I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I dreamed of the shadow. It stood at the foot of our bed, watching. Not moving. Not breathing. Just, waiting. The next few days passed without incident, but the feeling never left me. At work, I found myself distracted. I caught glimpses of movement in the reflective surfaces of my office windows, just quick flickers, gone when I turned my head. At home, I started keeping the curtains drawn at night. My wife noticed my strange behavior but didn't press. Then came the knocking. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I woke to the sound. A light, deliberate tap against glass. Tap. 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 At first, I thought it was my imagination. But then it came again. Tap. 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 I turned my head toward the source, the bedroom window. My pulse turned to ice. A shape loomed beyond the glass. barely visible against the darkness outside. A tall, black figure. No features. No face. Just standing there, close enough to touch the window. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and tapped again. Tap. 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 I shot upright, gasping. My wife stirred beside me. "What's wrong?" she murmured sleepily. I looked back at the window. The figure was gone. Nothing but an empty yard, bathed in moonlight. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Hear what?" I didn't know what to say. After a long pause, I shook my head. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." But I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, staring at the window until the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. I knew then that this was not my imagination. Something was here. Watching. Waiting. And it wanted me to know. I woke up exhausted. Every muscle in my body ached from the tension of staying awake all night. My wife, Lisa, had already left for work by the time I stumbled downstairs. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the house in a warm glow. In the daylight, the fear from the night before seemed almost foolish. Almost. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, trying to shake off the lingering unease. Then, on a whim, I walked to the sliding glass door and pulled back the curtains. And my stomach dropped. There, pressed into the damp grass of our backyard, were footprints. They weren't mine. Lisa hadn't been outside that morning, and we had no pets, no kids. Yet, the footprints were clear, deep, unmistakable. They started just beyond the patio and led toward the bedroom window. And then, nothing. No return prints. No sign of where they had gone. As if whoever made them had simply vanished. I stepped back, my breath coming faster. My logical brain struggled for an explanation. Maybe a trespasser. A neighbor messing around. But why would someone walk toward my house and never walk away? And then I remembered the knocking. Tap. 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 The sound echoed in my head, sending a cold shudder down my spine. This wasn't a prank. Something had been standing outside my window last night. Something that left no trace of departure. And it knew I had seen it. That evening, I tried to act normal. I cooked dinner, made small talk with Lisa, even forced a few laughs at the sitcom we watched together on the couch. But beneath it all, my mind churned. I needed proof. So before bed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I dug out the old baby monitor from storage. We had bought it when Lisa's niece used to stay over, but now it sat in a forgotten box in the garage. I plugged it in, placing the receiver on my nightstand and the camera facing the backyard through the kitchen window. If something was out there, I would see it. Lisa was asleep within minutes, but I lay awake, listening to the soft hum of the monitor. At first, it was just the usual static, the occasional pop of white noise. Then, at exactly 2:57 a.m., the sound changed. A soft, rhythmic breathing came through the speaker. Slow. Measured. Not mine. Not Lisa's. My heart pounded. I reached for the monitor with a shaking hand and stared at the tiny screen. The night vision image was grainy, but the backyard was empty. The camera wasn't picking up anything. And yet, the breathing continued. I turned the volume down, convinced I was hearing things. But then, a voice, low, whispered. Just 2 words. Come outside. I threw the monitor across the room. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the static hissing violently before cutting off. Lisa stirred. What was that? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing. Just knocked something over. She mumbled something incoherent and rolled over. I sat up the rest of the night, staring at the window, waiting for the knocking to come again. It never did. But I knew, without a doubt, that it would. The next morning, I told myself I had imagined it. Lack of sleep. A stray radio signal interfering with the monitor. Stress playing tricks on my mind. Anything to explain away the voice. But deep down, I knew better. Something was here. And it wasn't leaving. That evening, Lisa suggested we go out for dinner. She could sense my restlessness, the way I jumped at small noises. My reluctance to look out the windows after dark. She thought a change of scenery would help. She was wrong. We got home around 10. Lisa went upstairs to shower while I lingered in the living room, sipping the last of my beer and flipping through channels. Then, from the hallway, I heard a creak. My body went rigid. It had come from upstairs. A single, deliberate step on the hardwood floor. I muted the TV. Another step. Then another. Slow, measured, moving toward the staircase. A cold sensation crept up my spine. Lisa was still in the shower, I could hear the water running. I stood, heart hammering, and turned toward the hallway. And there, just at the edge of the light, was a shadow. Not on the floor. Not against the wall. A standing shadow, just beyond the bottom of the stairs. Tall. Still. Watching me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The shape didn't advance. It didn't retreat. It just stood there. And then, it took a step forward. I lunged for the nearest light switch, flooding the hallway with brightness. The shadow was gone. I raced upstairs, threw open the bathroom door. Steam billowed around Lisa as she turned off the shower, startled. "Jesus, you scared me," she said. "What's wrong?" I couldn't answer. My hands were shaking. Something had been in the house. Watching. Waiting. And I had the horrible feeling it had been there for a long, long time. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, every muscle tense, listening for sounds in the darkness. But the house was silent. Too silent. At some point, exhaustion won. I slipped into a restless sleep. And then, at exactly 3 a.m., I woke up. Not because of a noise. Not because of a nightmare. Because I felt something watching me. I turned my head slowly toward the bedroom window. And my blood turned to ice. A face. Pressing against the glass from the outside. Not a normal face. No eyes. No mouth. Just the suggestion of features, like an impression left in fog. It was too high off the ground. No ladder. No ledge. Just a sheer drop beneath the window. But the thing was there. Watching me. Waiting. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Then, so slowly it made my stomach twist, the face began to smile. A jagged, impossible grin, stretching wider and wider. As if the skin itself were splitting open. And then, it faded. Vanished, as if it had never been there. I shot out of bed, heart slamming against my ribs. I ran to the window. Yanked the curtains closed. Lisa stirred. "What's wrong?" she mumbled. I swallowed hard. Nothing. Just, bad dreams. But I knew. This was no dream. It was real. And it was getting closer. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The air in the house felt heavier, charged with a presence I couldn't see but could feel. Every shadow stretched too long. Every reflection in the windows seemed to linger a second too long after I moved. And the worst part? I started noticing little things. The bedroom door, which I knew I had closed before bed, would be slightly open in the morning. The dining chairs were an inch out of place. The attic door in the hallway, a door we never used, had a small gap. As if someone had tried to pull it open from the inside. I kept my mouth shut. Lisa didn't need to know. Not yet. That night, I decided to test something. I placed a glass of water on the nightstand. Then, just before bed, I closed the closet door. I stared at it for a long time, feeling ridiculous. It was just a closet. But something about it made my skin crawl. I turned off the light and lay down. And sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. The room was pitch dark. Silent. But something felt wrong. I reached for the glass of water. And my hand knocked against nothing. I fumbled in the dark, feeling around. The glass was gone. Then. Creak. A slow, deliberate sound. Coming from the closet. My stomach turned to ice. The door. I had closed it before bed. I knew I had. But now. It was open. Just a crack. Just wide enough for someone, or something, to watch me. I stared at that sliver of darkness, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then, so soft it was almost inaudible. A whisper. Right from inside the closet. I see you. I lunged for the lamp. Flooding the room with light. The closet door was wide open now. But inside. There was nothing. No glass of water. No footprints. No signs of movement. Just empty darkness. And yet, I knew something had been there. Watching. Waiting. And whispering my name. I didn't tell Lisa. I wanted to. But how do you tell your wife, I think something is living in our house? She already thought I was acting paranoid. So I kept my mouth shut. But the next night, she woke me up. Hey, she whispered, shaking my shoulder. Wake up. I groaned. What is it? Lisa's voice was tense. There's someone in the room. Instantly, I was awake. She was sitting up, clutching the blanket. Her eyes were fixed on the far corner of the bedroom. I turned my head slowly. And my entire body went cold. A figure stood in the corner. Tall. Thin. Almost too tall, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. Its body was a void, black, formless. Yet somehow human-shaped. And it was just, standing there. Not moving. Not breathing. Watching us. Lisa's grip tightened on my arm. Do you see it? She whispered. I swallowed. Yes. For what felt like forever, we just sat there, staring at it. Then. It took a step forward. Lisa sucked in a sharp breath. I bolted upright and reached for the lamp. The light came on. The corner was empty. Lisa let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her chest. Oh my God. But I was already out of bed, moving to the spot where the figure had been. The air there was cold. Freezing cold, like an open refrigerator door. Lisa was shaking. What the hell was that? I had no answer. All I knew was that this thing, whatever it was no longer content with watching. It was getting closer. The next day, Lisa barely spoke. She didn't have to. The dark circles under her eyes, the way she avoided looking at the bedroom corner. The way she jumped at the smallest sound, it was all there. She had seen it too. And that meant I wasn't crazy. That night, I stayed awake long after Lisa had fallen asleep. I kept the lamp on. My ears straining for any sound, my eyes locked on the corners of the room. For a while, nothing happened. Then. A sound. Faint at first. Almost imperceptible. A soft, dry scratching. It was coming from inside the walls. I sat up slowly. The noise grew louder, a slow, methodical scraping, like nails dragging across wood. I turned to Lisa, but she was still asleep. How could she not hear it? The scratching moved. It started near the closet, then shifted, crawling along the length of the wall toward the bed. I held my breath. It stopped. For a long moment. There was only silence. Then. Tap. 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 Right above my head. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Lisa stirred beside me. "What is it?" she murmured groggily. I swallowed hard. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." She was already drifting off again. But I couldn't. Because I knew that whatever was in the walls, it was listening. The next day, I called a contractor to check for animals in the walls. He found nothing. No rodents. No birds. No damage. "Probably just the house settling," he said with a shrug. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep down, I knew better. That night, Lisa went to bed early. I stayed up, pacing the living room, debating whether I should sleep downstairs. But I couldn't avoid it forever. I finally turned off the lights and went upstairs. The bedroom door was open. Had I left it that way? Lisa was fast asleep, her breathing soft and even. I hesitated in the doorway, suddenly overcome by a strange, paralyzing feeling. Something felt off. I stepped inside. And that's when I saw it. Not in the closet. Not in the corner. Under the bed. A hand. Thin. Pale. Just barely visible, curled around the edge of the bed frame. Motionless. Waiting. My throat tightened. I wanted to run. To turn on every light in the house and never close my eyes again. But instead, I took a step closer. The hand twitched. I hit the light switch. Nothing. The space under the bed was empty. But the moment I looked away, I heard it. A slow, deliberate scraping sound. Coming from directly beneath me. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Lisa. We didn't talk about it. But we both felt it. The thing in our house was no longer content with shadows. It wanted more. And it was getting bolder. The next morning, Lisa looked worse than I had ever seen her. She sat at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "You didn't sleep either, did you?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared down into her coffee, as if searching for something in its swirling surface. Then, in a low voice, she said, "I heard my name last night." A cold weight settled in my chest. "In a dream?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Lisa shook her head. "No. I was half asleep, and then I heard it, someone whispering my name, right next to my ear. It sounded." She swallowed hard. "It sounded like you." I didn't know what to say. Because I had heard the exact same thing. But I didn't tell her that. Not yet. Instead, I put my hand over hers. "We're just exhausted. Maybe we should get away for a while. Stay at a hotel, clear our heads." She exhaled shakily, nodding. "Yeah. Maybe." We both knew it wouldn't help. Because this thing, whatever it was, wasn't just in the house. It was in us. That afternoon, Lisa went to her sister's house for a few hours, needing a break from the house. I stayed behind. Telling her I had some work to finish. The truth was, I wanted to be alone. I wanted to see if it would show itself. For hours, the house was silent. No footsteps. No scratching. And then, just as I was beginning to relax, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. No caller ID. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. At first, there was nothing but static. A soft, crackling hiss. Like an old radio stuck between stations. Then, a whisper. Faint, distorted, barely audible. Come outside. I went cold. The same words. The same voice from the baby monitor. The whisper came again. More insistent. Come outside. I hung up. My hands were shaking. A text came through immediately after. No number. Just a single word. Look. I turned my head slowly toward the window. And my breath caught in my throat. A figure stood on the front lawn. Tall. Unmoving. Watching me. No features. No face. Just an empty, black void where a person should be. I backed away from the window, my pulse hammering. The phone rang again. I didn't answer this time. But I didn't need to. Because from the speaker, even through the static, I could hear breathing. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The figure on the lawn didn't either. It just stood there, impossibly still, as if waiting for something. Then, the porch light flickered. Once. Twice. And when it steadied, the figure was gone. Not vanished into the shadows. Not walked away. Just, gone. But I knew better than to believe it had left. I locked every door in the house. Closed every curtain. Turned on every light. But the feeling never faded. That terrible, crawling sensation of being watched. Then, from the hallway. A creak. A soft, deliberate footstep. I turned slowly. And there, standing in the doorway to the kitchen, was a shape. Not outside. Inside. In my house. It was tall, just like before. Featureless. A void in the shape of a man. But this time, it was closer. I couldn't move. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. The thing stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then, in a slow, unnatural movement, it tilted its head. And I swear to God, it smiled. Not a normal smile. Not a human smile. A grin that stretched too wide, as if its skin were tearing apart. Then, the lights flickered. Darkness swallowed the room for less than a second. And when the lights came back, the doorway was empty. But the feeling remained. It hadn't left. It was still here. Watching. Waiting. Closer than ever. Lisa came home an hour later. She found me sitting at the kitchen table, every light in the house blazing. "Jesus, are you okay?" she asked. Setting her purse down. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to beg her to leave this house and never come back. But what if that wasn't enough? What if it followed us? So instead, I just nodded. Yeah. Just tired. She didn't look convinced. That night, we went to bed with the lamp on. But sleep didn't come easily. At some point, though, exhaustion won. And then, Lisa screamed. I jolted awake. Heart slamming in my chest. She was thrashing in bed, eyes squeezed shut, whimpering. "Lisa." I shook her. "Wake up." Her eyes snapped open, wild with terror. She gasped. Clutching my arms so tightly her nails dug into my skin. I held her close as her breathing slowed. "What happened?" She shuddered. I had a dream. You were standing in the corner, staring at me. But your face. She trailed off, shaking her head violently. It wasn't your face. A sick feeling coiled in my gut. Because I knew. That hadn't been a dream. Lisa refused to talk about the dream. She just curled up beneath the covers, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her back turned to me. But I couldn't ignore it. Because what she had seen, what had looked like me, wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I had heard my own voice whispering her name. I had seen a figure standing in the dark that disappeared when the lights came on. And now, Lisa had dreamed of me, but not really me. What if it was never just watching? What if it was trying to become me? I didn't sleep. Not after that. I lay awake, listening. Waiting. Somewhere around 3 a.m., the bed shifted. Lisa turned over in her sleep, mumbling something under her breath. I reached out instinctively, brushing her arm. Her skin was ice cold. Lisa. I whispered. She didn't respond. I leaned closer. And then. She giggled. Soft. Wrong. Not like Lisa at all. My blood went cold. She shifted again, pressing her face into the pillow, still laughing under her breath. Then, in a voice that was barely hers. He's watching. My entire body locked up. Lisa. I shook her, harder this time. Her eyes fluttered open, bleary and confused. What is it? She murmured. I swallowed. You were talking in your sleep. She frowned, rubbing her eyes. I was. I nodded. She yawned, rolling onto her back. What did I say? I hesitated. I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Because what if saying it out loud made it real? So instead, I forced a smile. Nothing. Just nonsense. She sighed, already drifting off again. But I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. Because I knew. Lisa wasn't the one who had spoken. The next morning, Lisa left for work early. I stayed behind, telling her I had a headache. The truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That whatever had been lurking in the shadows was getting bolder. I spent the morning walking through the house, checking every door. Every window. Every reflection. I stopped in front of the hallway mirror. For a long time, I just stared. My own reflection stared back. Normal. Familiar. But then. Something shifted. Not in the room. In the mirror. A delay. Barely a fraction of a second. I lifted my hand. My reflection followed. But just a heartbeat too late. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look closer. The eyes. Something was wrong with the eyes. They were just a little too dark. A little too empty. Then. My reflection smiled. I didn't. I stumbled backward, slamming into the opposite wall. But in the mirror. My reflection just stood there. Smiling. Watching. Waiting. Then, so slowly it made my stomach twist. It lifted a hand. And waved. I ran. I spent the rest of the day avoiding mirrors. Avoiding my own reflection. Lisa came home just after sunset. She seemed off. Quiet. Distant. At dinner, she barely touched her food. You okay? I asked, trying to sound normal. She nodded slowly. Then, in a hesitant voice, she said, something weird happened today. I set down my fork. What? She exhaled, rubbing her temples. I was in a meeting, and my coworker, Janet, she asked me something strange. What did she ask? Lisa hesitated. Then. She asked why I was outside her house last night. The air between us turned cold. I stared at her. What? I whispered. Lisa nodded. She swore she saw me. Just standing on her front lawn, in the middle of the night. She waved, but I didn't react. Just kept standing there. Watching. A shiver ran down my spine. Lisa, I said carefully, were you at Janet's house last night? She shook her head. Of course not. I was here. With you. Silence stretched between us. Then Lisa swallowed hard. She said. She trailed off, like she didn't want to say it out loud. She said what? I pressed. Lisa took a deep breath. She said I looked wrong. Lisa's words sat between us like a weight, thick and suffocating. She said I looked wrong. The fork in my hand suddenly felt heavy. I set it down carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. What did she mean by that? Lisa hesitated. She said. I was smiling at her. A chill ran down my spine. But it wasn't a normal smile, she continued. She said it was, too wide. Too forced. Like I was trying to look human but didn't know how. I stared at her. And in that moment, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Just for a second. Like something else was watching me through her skin. I forced a smile, pretending I wasn't shaking inside. Janet probably imagined it, I said carefully. Lisa exhaled, rubbing her arms. Yeah. Probably. But we both knew that wasn't true. Because something had been outside Janet's house last night. And it had been wearing Lisa's face. Neither of us slept that night. Lisa tossed and turned. Mumbling in her sleep. I stayed awake, listening. Waiting. At exactly 2:59 a.m., I heard it. Knock. 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 Not from the front door. From the bedroom door. My entire body locked up. Lisa was still beside me, breathing softly. But someone, or something, was on the other side of that door. I sat up slowly, heart hammering. The knock came again. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Like it knew I was awake. I reached toward Lisa, shaking her gently. Lisa, I whispered. Wake up. She stirred, groggy. What? The knocking stopped. I waited, frozen. Lisa blinked up at me. Confused. What's wrong? I hesitated. Had I imagined it? No. I knew what I had heard. But when I turned toward the door, it was open. Just a crack. Lisa sat up. Did you open that? I shook my head. My throat dry. The hallway beyond was pitch dark. Something was out there. Watching. Waiting. And then. From the darkness, barely a whisper. Let me in. Lisa heard it too. She grabbed my arm. Her fingers digging in so hard it hurt. The voice, it was my voice. But I hadn't spoken. We both stared at the open door, breathless, frozen. And then. The mattress shifted. Like someone else was in bed with us. Lisa and I turned at the same time. The blankets beside her were lifting. As if an invisible weight was pressing into the mattress. A hollow, human-shaped indent appeared between us. Lisa gasped, scrambling back. Get up, she cried. But I couldn't move. Because a hand, a pale, skeletal hand, was crawling up from beneath the sheets. Not from the side. Not from the foot of the bed. From inside the mattress itself. It was reaching for Lisa. I didn't think. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her out of bed. We crashed to the floor just as the sheets collapsed, the indent vanishing. For a long, terrible moment, neither of us moved. The room was silent. The bed was still. But we knew it was still there. Buried inside the mattress. Waiting for us to fall asleep. We didn't stay in the bedroom. We grabbed blankets and huddled in the living room, every light in the house on. Lisa clutched a mug of coffee, her hands shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What does it want?" I had no answer. Because the truth was worse than I could say out loud. It didn't just want to haunt us. It wanted to replace us. First, it had whispered in the dark. Then, it had stood in the doorway. Then, it had started wearing our faces. What would happen when it didn't need us anymore? A knock at the door made us both jump. Lisa gasped. "Who?" We stared at each other, then at the front door. Another knock. I swallowed. "Stay here." Lisa shook her head violently. "No. Don't open it." But I had to. I moved toward the door, every step slow, deliberate. Something felt wrong. I reached for the knob. And then. A voice spoke from the other side. "Let me in." Lisa let out a small whimper. I went rigid. The voice. It was Lisa's. But she was right behind me. The thing outside knocked again. "Please. Let me in. It's cold out here." I turned toward Lisa. She shook her head, eyes wide with horror. "Don't open it." I took a breath. And then, I did something I shouldn't have done. I leaned forward. And looked through the peephole. My stomach turned to ice. Lisa was standing outside. Her eyes were empty. Her smile was too wide. "Let me in," she whispered. I stumbled back from the door, my breath caught in my throat. The thing outside, the thing wearing Lisa's face, tilted its head, pressing closer to the peephole. "Let me in." Its voice was softer now. Almost pleading. Behind me, the real Lisa whispered, "Don't listen to it." But something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Because as I turned to face Lisa, she wasn't where I had left her. She was closer. Too close. And she was smiling. My pulse slammed against my ribs. A cold realization crept over me. "What did I just tell you?" Lisa whispered. But her voice. It didn't sound right. I took a step back, my legs unsteady. "Lisa," I rasped, "what?" A hand grabbed my wrist. Hard. Lisa, the real Lisa, yanked me back. "It's not me," she hissed. I turned just in time to see the other Lisa standing in my place, smiling. Too wide. Too wrong. And then. It lunged. Lisa screamed. I barely managed to pull her away as the thing's hands snapped toward us, grasping at empty air. The front door burst open, the wind howled inside. I didn't think. I shoved Lisa behind me and grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy lamp from the table. The thing in the living room, the thing that looked like my wife, stood perfectly still. Then. It twitched. Like a puppet with cut strings. Its neck cracked to the side, too fast, too unnatural. And then. It laughed. A low, wet, choking sound. Lisa clutched my arm, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Don't look at it," she whispered. But I couldn't look away. The thing's face had started melting. The edges of its features dissolved like wax under a flame. Its smile stretched wider. And then. It stepped toward us. I didn't think. I swung the lamp. Glass shattered. A horrible shriek filled the house, high-pitched, unnatural, full of rage. The thing stumbled back, its form flickering, warping, shifting. Its face, Lisa's face, was coming apart. It wasn't human. It had never been human. And now, it knew we weren't afraid anymore. The thing's form rippled, its limbs stretching into unnatural, jagged shapes. Then, it turned. And ran. Not toward the door. Not toward a window. But toward the hallway mirror. It threw itself inside. The glass rippled, like the surface of a lake. And then, it was gone. We left that night. We didn't pack. We didn't turn off the lights. We just left. Checked into a hotel. Called a realtor the next morning. The house went on the market the same week. We didn't tell them what had happened. Who would believe us? We moved across the city. New place. New furniture. But even now, even in this new house, I still refuse to look at the mirrors after dark. Because sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of something that isn't quite me. And sometimes, it's smiling.